Four men strike at a restaurant. What this teen revealed will leave you inspired and transformed. Jake McAllister had never seen chaos unfold right before his eyes, until now. A hot afternoon, the usual aroma of frying bacon filling the diner, but everything changed in an instant when four sharply dressed men burst through the door. Their boisterous voices sliced through the gentle chatter of the locals, and Jake's stomach turned as he recognized that tone, privilege laced with impatience. They were angry, and their eyes locked onto Annette, his mother, as if she were the cause of their discontent over a simple meal mix-up. Jake braced himself. His heart raced. His palms grew clammy. This wasn't just another irritating customer. This was an affront not just to his mother, but to their entire existence. He watched her face morph from confusion to embarrassment, the color draining away, revealing a depth of stress that had become all too familiar. She had worked double shifts to provide for them, pouring her life into those long hours spent behind the counter, often weary but always resilient. The thought of those sacrifices ignited a fire inside of Jake. The pressure mounted as he felt a moral dilemma uncoil within him. Should he stand up for her right now, risking confrontation, or should he retreat, letting the humiliation wash over them? Before he could make a decision, the men pressed on, berating her as she fumbled with their orders. Jake clenched his teeth. He could feel the powerful societal dynamics swirling like a storm. This was where he hesitated, where fear fought against his deep-seated loyalty. He caught sight of the other patrons. Their expressions mirrored his. They were all waiting, silently supporting him. And yet it was that very silence, that lack of action from everyone, that roused him further. Shouldn't someone step in? He was terrified, but there was no more time to waste. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Jake took a deep breath and stepped toward the men. "Excuse me," he said, voice steady even as his insides quaked. "I think you've forgotten something. My mother, she's been working her heart out for years. You can't just barge in here and bully her because your eggs were cooked wrong." The words spilled from him, driven by both anger and an intense need for justice. The men paused, taken aback.
Jake pressed on, the rush of emotion fueling his every word. "I spoke about sacrifice, of the late nights spent studying by the light of a flickering bulb, the dreams flickering on the edge of hope, fragile yet vibrant. He laid bare humanity's shared struggles. Suddenly, one of the men looked away, his facade cracking as he revealed a piece of past regret, a family struggle that had mirrored Jake's in some way. The room fell silent, shifting the air between them, as if everything had suddenly become clear, exposing unspoken truths. But just as Jake started to sense that the battle lines were shifting, there was another interruption. The diner's back door swung open, and in walked the principal from his high school, eyes wide with disbelief. The tension in the room thickened, and Jake's stomach dropped. What would he do? Would this be the moment that shattered his courage, or would it usher in a deeper confrontation? In that instant, his fate hung in the balance, leaving the room teetering on the brink of upheaval, ready to explode, for better or worse. Jake's heart raced as he caught sight of his principal, Mr. Thompson, standing frozen at the entrance. The sudden presence of authority heightened the tension, transforming the diner into a battleground. Would Mr. Thompson intervene, or would he, like everyone else, simply watch? Jake felt the weight of expectation swirl around him, pressing down with an insistent urgency. The men shifted their attention, wavering in their posturing. In that moment, Jake saw a chance, a flicker of possibility. He turned to Mr. Thompson, desperation seeping into his voice. "Sir, you can't let them bully my mom like this." As he spoke, he noticed the principal's brows furrow in concern, a man torn between authority and empathy. Without waiting for Mr. Thompson's response, Jake focused back on the men. "She has worked for years to keep this place going, to support us. You're not here to tear her down over a mistake. You're here to eat." His voice erupted, filled with conviction. He articulated the unsaid, the collective anxiety pooling in the diner, giving it a physical form. There was power here, in standing up, a surge of energy that drove him forward. He felt a sense of purpose rising within, as though a dormant version of himself was finally awakening. The men's expressions shifted, confusion and irritation giving way to subtle hesitation. More silence filled the room, as though the air had thickened with unspoken understanding. The principal stepped forward cautiously, and Jake felt a flame of hope ignite. "This isn't just a restaurant," Mr. Thompson said, his voice steady. "It's a community, a place where people like Annette pour their efforts into providing for families. A ripple of support spread through the diner. Others began nodding, firmly engaging with the unfolding drama. The cashier, who Jake realized had been silently cheering his mom on, raised her fists in solidarity.
It was as if every individual present began to reclaim some fragment of their dignity. It was no longer merely about the incorrect eggs, but about identities rooted in resilience, labor, and respect. Jake's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a reaction to adversity. It was a defining moment. He felt himself gaining a pulse of leadership, a flicker of insight about what he could become. The flame that had ignited in him now sparked a commitment. He could stand firm and advocate not just for his mother, but for others as well. Just as the four men began to step back, Mr. Thompson added, "If you cannot treat those working hard to serve you with respect, then perhaps you should reconsider whether you belong in this community." The principal's words hung in the air, unwavering. The men exchanged glances, indecision clouding their expressions. Finally, one of them turned on his heels, muttering curses, while the others followed suit, retreating as the diner filled with murmurs of relief and triumph. Jake stood there, breathing heavily, the adrenaline of the confrontation coursing through him. He was acutely aware that this was just the beginning, a moment of transformation that had unlocked a wave of potential within him. As his mother, shaken but proud, came to stand beside him, he found a new resolve blossoming in his heart. But as the reality of the moment settled in, Jake's thoughts turned toward the implications of his stand. This courage didn't just spring from the conflict. It came from knowing oneself, knowing what one stood for. What did this newfound bravery mean for his future? What next steps would he take to evolve beyond this singular act of courage? In the midst of celebration, Jake felt a shift inside, the urge to explore what being unyielding truly entails. He realized that he needed to harness this momentum, to discover what other facets of himself needed to be unearthed. The challenge lay ahead. How would he channel this courage into a path of personal growth and purpose? As he looked around the diner, absorbing the warmth of collective camaraderie, Jake could not shake the feeling that his path was only beginning to unfold, full of challenges yet to confront. The weight of potential rested heavily on his shoulders as he anticipated, with both excitement and trepidation, what the next chapter of his journey would unveil. With the dust settling in the diner, Jake began to navigate the aftershocks of their recently won confrontation. The air, once thick with tension, now felt lighter, but Jake's heart still pounded with a bewildering blend of triumph and uncertainty. He couldn't shake the feeling that the moment had merely skimmed the surface, revealing a vast ocean of potential beneath. Jake's mother, Annette, seemed to reclaim her role behind the counter, her hands moving through the familiar motions of serving customers. He watched her, a quiet fury bubbling beneath the surface of her composed demeanor. It struck him then, the weight of what he had done and the burden that came with it. Standing up to the men had not just been a mere act of defiance, it had been a declaration of who he was, of who he might become. As his mother exchanged relieved smiles with regulars, Jake slipped out of the diner, inhaling the cool, crisp air outside, allowing it to invigorate his scattered thoughts. He walked aimlessly, replaying the scene in his head. Each word he had said felt like a stone dropped into a pond, creating ripples. But what were the implications of those ripples? How would he build upon this moment? Determined to understand himself better, Jake turned to a spot in the park where he often sought solitude. Sitting on a bench, he wrestled with the echo of his own voice in the diner. What did it mean, standing up for his mother? Was he just reacting, or was he asserting an identity that had long been dormant? The realization hit him. He needed to amplify this voice, channeling it into something more than spontaneous bravery. The moment's adrenaline faded, revealing the stark reality that he couldn't simply rely on instinct in the future. Jake began to explore better strategies to keep that flame alive. He thought about developing practical skills, perhaps joining a debate team or a community organization. Both seemed foreign and intimidating, yet undeniably appealing. The path to refining this newfound courage was still hazy, but he felt a magnetic pull towards it. What if he could learn to articulate his thoughts more eloquently? What if he could empower others, inspiring them as he had just done for his mother? Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Jake's resolve strengthened. He sought moments to practice his voice, speaking up in class discussions, challenging unfair treatment among peers. His actions were deliberate, reinforcing the muscle of his conviction. With every small victory, he shed layers of fear, feeling lighter and more capable. No longer stuck as a mere observer, he pushed boundaries in ways he had never imagined possible. The courage to stand up became an innate part of him, intertwining with his evolving identity. He found himself chasing opportunities that frightened him, including presenting ideas to student council about addressing issues faced in their community. Yet just when he felt he was on the brink of transformation, a wave of doubt crested in. What if he stumbled? What if failure awaited him?
The prospect of being critiqued or dismissed stung like a flicker of cold water, igniting an urgency to live up to the potential he was carving out for himself. Jake stood at the intersection of growth and fear, fully aware that strength and vulnerability intertwined in this relentless dance. As he prepared for the upcoming student council meeting, he felt the weight of expectation once again. This time it balanced on the precipice of his ambition.
Everything hinged on how he could harness this newfound authority over his voice amidst uncertainties. The time had come to face not just external challenges, but to confront the critic within. Would he rise once again when all eyes were on him? Would he find a way to deliver his vision, no matter the fear clawing at his insides? And he was ready to unveil who he truly was meant to become. Jake arrived at the school the following Friday, an electric buzz coursing through his veins. The air was thick with anticipation as he approached the hall where the student council meeting was to take place. Each footstep felt deliberate, grounding him to the reality of what lay ahead. Was this a chance to truly speak and be heard? As he stepped into the crowded space, he took a moment to absorb the energy around him. Students mingled, some nervously rehearsing speeches, while others engaged in animated discussions. Jake swallowed hard, the enormity of the situation settling on him like a blanket. This was no longer just about standing up for his mother. This was about standing up for himself, solidifying his place not only in this school, but in a narrative that was increasingly becoming his own. He glimpsed the student council members seated at the front, their expressions serious as they prepared to moderate the session. He could see Alex, the council president, glancing over the agenda. A knot of anxiety twisted in Jake's stomach. What if his ideas were met with ridicule? What if he stumbled over his words? The room buzzed with noise, yet within him a steady calm began to emerge. He recalled the weight of his previous confrontation and how it had reframed everything he believed himself to be. In that fleeting moment, a quiet revelation unveiled itself. He had survived adversity, and while this might not be life-threatening, it was still a test of his resolve. As the council members called the meeting to order, Jake's heart raced. Each speaker stepped forward to present their ideas, and Jake listened intently, absorbing not just their words, but the power of their convictions. After several discussions on trivial matters, it was almost time for him to present. He could sense the end of the meeting drawing near, and the urgency of his thoughts sharpened. He hadn't prepared an elaborate speech. His strength lay in his ability to speak authentically, to connect even in the face of vulnerability. He had to remind himself it was not about perfection, but authenticity. When his name was finally called, he stood, grappling with a mix of confidence and self-doubt. He felt the collective gaze of peers and older students resting on him, and for a fragmented moment, he wavered. Maybe he wasn't ready for this, but then he heard his own heartbeat like a drum, steadying him.
Jake stepped forward, heart surging with intention. He opened his mouth and began to speak, articulating thoughts that flowed straight from his heart. "We all want our voices to matter," he stated, grounding his speech in the shared experience of the room. He spoke about instances of unfair treatment and the need for a school environment that embraced every voice. The words tumbled out with purpose, not as rehearsed lines, but as genuine expressions of his internal struggles and what he had learned about courage. He observed a range of emotions flicker across faces, some nodding in agreement, others contemplating. The initial flicker of doubt within him started to spark a flame. He was sparking something: movement, conversation. Yet as the applause surrounded him, a thrumming uncertainty persisted beneath the surface. Had he truly connected? Did they see beyond the words? The ache of potential dismissal lingered, taunting him like shadows sneaking in the corners of his mind. He glanced toward the council, noticing Alex with a slight nod of approval, though Jake sensed deeper critiques looming just outside of his awareness. But how could he quiet the noise of that looming uncertainty unless he heard the responses that followed? As he resumed his seat, adrenaline pulsed through him, mixed with the remnants of fear flirting at the edges of his confidence. He had taken that step forward, but now he craved validation that his ideas resonated, that he wasn't simply shouting into the void. With new resolutions and a new wave of anticipation, he glanced around the room, surveying faces that had fought battles of their own. He could sense this was just the beginning of a far more profound journey, a journey that would challenge not just his courage, but his understanding of connection and agency. But as discussions continued, a familiar figure entered the hall. A shadow from his past loomed large.
The tension in the room shifted once again, and Jake realized the true test of his growth had only just begun. Would he hold firm against this new confrontation, or would the flames of his resolve flicker in fear? Jake's heart raced as he caught sight of the figure that had just entered the hall. There, standing with an air of confidence that seemed almost unwelcome, was his former friend, Max. The buzz of the meeting dulled, replaced by an uncomfortable silence punctuated by hushed conversations. Memories surged through Jake's mind, moments of friendship that had turned bitter, and the betrayal that had cut deep. Max's presence stirred a tempest inside him. Max had always been the kind of guy who thrived on popularity, using charisma to catapult himself to the forefront, often at the expense of others. This time, though, Jake steeled himself. He couldn't allow Max to intimidate him. He wouldn't succumb to the familiar vortex of self-doubt.
The realization washed over him. Jake was no longer the hesitant kid he once was. He possessed something invaluable now: his voice, his conviction. As eyes shifted between Jake and Max, the room buzzed with unspoken tension. Jake was acutely aware of the council members shifting in their seats, their gazes darting from the two of them. He could read the undercurrent, a sense of intrigue mixed with concern. This wasn't just an unexpected reunion, it felt like another reckoning. "Hey, Jake," Max called out, a grin plastered across his face. The nonchalance in his tone only served to infuriate Jake further. "Nice speech, man. Didn't know you could rally the troops like that." Jake's pulse quickened. He knew Max's playful jabs were laced with something more sinister. It was a tactic he was all too familiar with, mocking someone under the guise of friendship. Instead of stepping back, Jake took a deep breath, channeling his inner strength. He wouldn't let Max reclaim any power over him. "I didn't come to rally anyone," Jake replied, meeting Max's gaze head-on. "I came to speak for those who feel unheard. You wouldn't understand that, would you?" The words hung in the air, unexpected yet liberating. Max squinted, trying to gauge Jake's defiance. "Oh, please, spare me the hero talk. This is just high school drama, isn't it? You really think you'll change anything?" In that instant, Jake felt the crowd with him. He could sense their reactions, feel the shifting tides of support. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Behind the masks of indifference, he glimpsed allies, students nodding slightly in solidarity. "I think we can," Jake responded, allowing the flames of frustration to fuel his determination. "Change starts with speaking up, and if you can't see that, maybe that's the real tragedy here." Silence enveloped the room again. He had taken a risk, confronting Max not just for himself, but for everyone who ever felt belittled. Yet Jake felt a tremor of anxiety beneath the surface. What would it mean to have labeled a former friend as an adversary? Had he overstepped? The tension hung thick, and as the meeting resumed, Max leaned back, a smirk curling at his lips. But Jake couldn't shake the sensation of a battle fought within, one that raged beyond this fleeting encounter. He seized the moment, leaning into his growing sense of agency, reminding himself that even in conflict, there lay potential for personal evolution. As the discussions continued around him, Jake's mind raced with possibilities. Could he find a way to unite voices, even those that seemed against him? Each question propelled him deeper into the realm of personal growth. He needed to navigate this landscape skillfully, understanding that confronting his fears now, facing shadows of his past, was a necessary step. With the echoes of their conflict still resonating, Jake knew he had to find a way to balance assertiveness with a willingness to engage others in dialogue. Would Max become a mere antagonist, or could this confrontation serve as a channel for reimagining their fractured relationship? The next meeting loomed large in Jake's mind. There were plans to explore, ideas to evolve, and perhaps even alliances to reforge. But above all, a crucial decision awaited him, one that could change not just the dynamic between him and Max, but reshape his path forward. And as the room buzzed with newly ignited discussions, Jake realized his growth was bound to intersect with the complexities around him. Would he embrace vulnerability to bridge divides, or would fear anchor him back to old patterns? The moment demanded resolution. Jake left the meeting feeling a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. The encounter with Max wasn't just a spat. It felt like the tip of an iceberg, a confrontation hinting at a much deeper rift in his internal landscape.
As he walked through the now empty hallways, the echo of his own voice replayed in his mind. Had he truly stepped into his power, or was he simply stirring the pot for more chaos? With every step, he questioned his motives. That voice he had so bravely used, was it truly for the unheard, or was it an act of rebellion against his own insecurities? He wanted to believe it was the former, but pieces of doubt lingered. Jake pulled out his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen. Should he reach out to someone for advice, or would that signify weakness? He hesitated, reflecting on a core truth. Growth often required leaning on others, even when it felt uncomfortable. The prospect of the next council meeting loomed in his mind like a storm cloud. Jake needed to prepare more than just his speech. He sought insight into the dynamics at play, how to bring those allies closer, and more importantly, how to confront Max strategically rather than impulsively. Connecting with others would be critical in this effort. He couldn't do it alone. He decided to reach out to Anna, a fellow council member who had impressed him with her ability to command attention without arrogance. Over coffee the next afternoon, Jake sought clarity, hoping to unravel the strategies behind effective dialogue. As they settled into their seats, he began to voice his concerns. "Anna, I think I may have fueled a conflict with Max by calling him out at the last meeting," he started. "Part of me felt powerful, but I wonder if I just escalated things." She nodded thoughtfully. "You confronted him, and that's significant, but you also need to think about how to turn this into a conversation rather than a contest. The dynamics can shift if you choose to engage rather than provoke." Jake absorbed her words, feeling the weight of responsibility begin to form. Could he turn his revelation into action? Rather than reacting out of fear, he could take the reins and guide the next meeting toward constructive dialogue. But the prospect also filled him with trepidation. What if Max rejected his outreach?
What if he became even more hostile? "Do you think it's worth it to extend an olive branch?" Jake asked, the uncertainty swirling inside him like a whirlpool. "Absolutely," Anna replied firmly. "You may not realize it, but by doing so, you also challenge the narrative. You redefine the terms of your relationship. Don't forget, he's not the only one with influence. People are watching how you choose to navigate this." Jake felt a flicker of resolve ignite within. The idea of reclaiming his narrative began to resonate more deeply. Perhaps reaching out didn't equate to weakness, but rather a calculated move toward maturity. He had the potential to influence not just his own story, but also how others perceived the dynamics of their group. As they wrapped up their meeting, Jake made a decision. He would speak to Max directly before the following council meeting. He would approach the situation calmly, expressing his intention to find common ground, but also indicating his stance for those who felt powerless. That night, Jake tapped away at his journal, articulating his thoughts and setting goals for the conversation. Each sentence brought clarity to his emerging path. This was more than just a conflict with Max. It would define how he engaged with conflict as a whole. As sleep eluded him, he replayed past scenarios in his mind, the moments that stung, the friendships that had devolved. But with this realization came growth. No more would he shy away from challenging situations. The storm that once churned within him transformed into a compass, guiding him forward. He paused, a thought striking him. What if his willingness to confront Max could not only redefine their dynamic, but also illustrate to others that conflict could lead to resolution? Ready to face the next meeting, Jake understood this was more than about him. It was an opportunity to pave the way for change, not just in his own heart, but within the very fabric of their group's culture. But as he turned off the light, the nagging sensation of doubt crept back. Could he truly step into this role without succumbing to fear? Tomorrow would be decisive. The moment had arrived to take ownership of his journey and confront the challenges head-on. Would he walk into that confrontation prepared for growth, or would the past take hold yet again? The morning sun pierced through the blinds, casting striped shadows across Jake's bedroom. It felt as if the day had arrived in vivid technicolor, each ray pulling him further into a world of possibility and uncertainty. He sat on the edge of his bed, his mind churning with the weight of the confrontation added. The specter of doubt lingered, reminding him of every moment he had hesitated, of every time he had deferred to others out of fear. He reached for his journal, the pages filled with recent reflections. Reading over his earlier musings reignited a sense of purpose. The decision to confront Max had solidified, but he needed a plan.
It struck him that this was more than just a conversation. It was a test of his own evolution.
The thought of confronting his own insecurities sent a ripple of tension through him, but that same tension held a promise of growth. In the shower, the water cascaded over him like a cleansing tide. Each drop was a reminder he was shedding layers of doubt. Jake mulled over the bits of advice from Anna, how he must engage and not provoke, how he was being watched, not just by Max, but by his fellow council members. This awareness brought with it an exhilarating mixture of responsibility and urgency. His actions could either fortify his authority or unravel it. Dressed and prepared, he arrived at the meeting space early, allowing the silence to settle around him. He took the time to center himself, breathing deeply, visualizing the encounter with Max. What exactly would he say? He couldn't afford to lead with hurt. He needed to channel a desire for understanding. How could he find common ground in a relationship that felt so fractured? As people began to fill in, Jake's heart raced. With each friendly nod exchanged, his spirit lifted slightly, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Anna arrived, her composed demeanor steadying him. "You ready?" she asked, her eyes scanning his face. "I think so," Jake replied, although doubt still snaked through his veins. "Trust yourself. You've got this." When Max entered, there was no need for dramatic fanfare. The air around him was thick with expectation. The tension between them felt palpable, yet Jake was determined to not succumb. He approached the seating area with conviction, aware that this interaction was about setting a tone for future discussions. "Max, can we talk for a moment?" Jake said, his voice firm yet calm. Max's eyes flickered with intrigue, perhaps even surprise. "Sure," he answered, crossing his arms defensively, but not retreating. Jake gestured towards a quieter corner, and they stepped away from the others. "I want to address what happened at the last meeting. I realize my words may have escalated things rather than diffused them." Max raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. "You're admitting there's a conflict?" "Absolutely. But rather than make it personal, I think it's important for us to understand each other's perspectives. I'm interested in what you think." There it was, the moment he had envisioned. He was no longer constrained by fear, but instead was driving the conversation. He felt a rush of confidence as he continued, knowingly stepping into a space of vulnerability. As Max began to respond, their dialogue morphed from an antagonistic stance into something more constructive. It was exhilarating to witness the shift, the hesitations loosening as they found commonalities in their experiences. But just as things seemed to stabilize, Max's voice dipped into sarcasm again, a defensive mechanism rearing its head. "So this is your way of trying to feel like the bigger person?" Jake felt the ground shift beneath him. The familiar stir of indignation bubbled up. Yet, with Anna's words echoing in his head, he resisted the impulse to retaliate. Instead, he chose to express how his actions came from a place of wanting to improve their dynamic, not to undermine Max. A pause hung in the air, filled with unspoken challenges. Would this be a moment of breakthrough or breakdown? Jake inhaled sharply, poised on the edge of a turning point, aware that how he reacted next could not only influence his relationship with Max, but also validate his journey towards personal strength. As the dialogue unfolded, he felt the delicate threads of confrontation and growth intertwined. The stakes were rising. Would he successfully navigate the storm and emerge transformed, or would he find himself retreating once more? Tomorrow would not only come with the aftermath of this meeting, but also an awakening of what he could truly accomplish if he dared to persist. The discovery of his own power was just beginning to take shape, but the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Would he embrace the challenge, or would fear lead him back to the shadows? The room seemed to inhale sharply, the air thick with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Jake's heart raced as Max's eyes narrowed, searching for cracks in Jake's composure. Time appeared to stretch in that moment, both of them immersed in the gravity of what was at stake. "Look," Max finally said, his tone leveling slightly. "It's not just you throwing shade anymore. I don't like being painted as the villain in a story I didn't write." The words hung in the air, and Jake felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Here was a person grappling not only with his own defensiveness, but also with perceptions born out of past conflicts. The realization sparked something within Jake, a shift from mere confrontation to understanding. "I get that," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "And I don't want to make you feel that way. My goal is to move past this, not to fuel a narrative of antagonism." Each word felt like an unveiling, revealing layers of his inner resolve. The tension noticeably loosened as they continued to talk. Jake began expressing his concerns about collaboration, emphasizing a desire for synergy rather than division. Max, for all his initial resistance, began to listen. This metamorphosis sparked a hope that perhaps mutual understanding was attainable. Yet doubt still simmered beneath the surface.
Was this breakthrough genuine, or just an ephemeral calm before another storm? Jake had to remain alert, balancing his vision of reconciliation with the reality that Max bore deep-rooted insecurities. "Why do you care so much?" Max challenged, frustration creeping back in. "This was never your fight." Jake considered the question. Why did it matter so much? As he pondered this, he recognized a pivotal truth. This conflict wasn't just about their professional dynamic, it was deeply personal.
He had spent too long allowing himself to be overshadowed, offering his voice only in support of others. Here, in this very moment, he was reclaiming his narrative. "I care because this team matters," Jake stated, meeting Max's gaze unwaveringly. "I want us to do something meaningful, together. If we don't clear this air, we jeopardize everything we're striving to achieve." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Max's face, and Jake seized the moment. "I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But what I want to work towards is something greater than either of us as individuals. It's time we stop focusing on the past and start channeling our energy into the future." By taking that risk, Jake felt an unexpected surge of strength. Each word propelled him closer to the leader he aspired to be, one that could bridge divides rather than deepen them. Still, the journey had only begun. Max's resistance eased, but Jake knew introspection wouldn't magically erase the past. They needed to build trust anew, brick by brick, a daunting task that loomed large. "What's your idea then?" Max asked, the challenge now tinged with curiosity rather than defiance. Jake took a deep breath, readying himself for a different kind of confrontation. He would need to articulate a vision for the team that encompassed not only their collaborative potential, but also allowed both of them to grow individually. With each suggestion, the dynamics slowly shifted, but doubts nagged in the back of Jake's mind. Could he truly harness this momentum? Could he sustain a new climate of cooperation, or would old tendencies emerge anew? The weight of the conversation pressed in on him, the way forward illuminated in fragments. Jake realized it wouldn't just be about leading a team, it would necessitate vigilance over his own growth and accountability, an ongoing quest burdened with uncertainty. Just as Jake prepared to articulate his vision, a sudden, jarring noise erupted from outside the meeting room, shattering their fragile moment. It echoed like a warning bell, as if the universe was signaling a challenge far beyond the walls of their discussion. Jake's heart pounded anew, instincts flaring. Would this chaos beckon him back into darkness, or would it fortify the resolve he was beginning to build? The confrontation was now larger than the two of them. Their developing understanding was about to be tested by forces they could not foresee. The very real question was, would they find a way to harness it together, or would the storm swallow their progress whole? Jake glanced at Max, the moment punctuated by the crashing sound that reverberated around them, the intrusive noise clawing at the remnants of their fragile understanding. Just outside the meeting room, chaos seemed to explode, voices rising, an indeterminate clatter, all signaling a disruption that felt personal, as if it were intended to test his resolve. He inhaled deeply, forcing himself to focus beyond the noise.
Max mirrored his anxiety, shifting in his seat, tension coiling between them once more. Jake's mind raced. This wasn't merely about navigating a discussion with Max anymore. This was a crucible moment, demanding clarity and purpose in the face of volatility. Staring into Max's eyes now, he saw the flicker of shared apprehension. They both stood on the edge of something crucial. They needed to act. "Let's see what's happening," Jake suggested, his voice steadier than his heart. It was time for action. This was the moment to embody the principle that had begun to take root within him, that the team's strength lay in solidarity through adversity. The intention to bridge the gaps required not just agreement, but a unified front. With tentative agreement, they both rose, equally driven by a mix of curiosity and dread. As they stepped out of the room into the cacophony, Jake was acutely aware that this was more than an external confrontation. It mirrored a deeper internal struggle. Every step was a reminder that he was not simply defending territory, but cultivating a new foundation for connection. The restaurant was a flurry of movement. Diners stood, some moving towards the exit, others gawked in horror. A group of 4 men, raised voices punctuating their actions, were engaged in a heated squabble over a perceived slight, pushing another patron, their yelling escalating the apprehension. Jake's instincts kicked in as he scanned the room for the sharp contours of conflict. The sight reminded him of his own battles, the decisions that had haunted him. Would he shrink back now, or would he forge forward, meeting chaos head-on? "Jake," Max's voice broke through his thoughts, tinged with urgency. "We can't just stand here." Adrenaline flooded through Jake, propelling him into motion. Without deliberation, he approached the tangled mass of bickering men, uncertain of exactly what he would say. His years of standing on the sidelines, supporting rather than leading, threatened to overwhelm him,
But this wasn't about flashing back to old fears. It was about claiming his voice, finally engaging with what was before him. "Hey, this isn't the way to resolve things." His voice rang out with surprising authority, arresting the attention of those involved. The atmosphere shifted as they turned towards him, shock mingling with confusion. In that moment, Jake felt a spark of his resolve returning, a burgeoning confidence shadowed by a nagging self-doubt. He realized he was not merely addressing the men, but was advocating for himself, a reflection of the transformation he was undergoing. Yet, as they paid him heed, he questioned if confrontation would yield results, or if it would simply further fuel their aggression. Max moved beside him, steadying the air with his presence. "Let's just talk this through," he added, a shared strength palpable between them.
The four men hesitated, their bravado wavering as they stared at Jake and Max, a scrutiny that felt invasive and daunting, yet emboldening. Would their intervention sway the moment, or would the brewing storm of discontent swallow their efforts whole? Whatever the outcome, Jake understood he stood at a crossroads. The path to professional development was far more complicated than simply rehashing arguments. It demanded courage, agility, and the relentless pursuit of validation, not just from others, but from within. As he held their gaze, ready to mediate a tumultuous situation, the stakes surged higher. Would he emerge from this encounter solidified in his newfound strength, or would he collapse under the weight of uncertainty? The silence that trickled in felt immense, poised to unearth revelations far beyond whatever chaos awaited. The moment had arrived. Confrontation wasn't simply a necessity, but an invitation to redefine himself. Would he rise to the occasion, or would anxiety claw him back? Delayed reactions hung in the charged air, but Jake felt weightier possibilities looming. His transformation hinged not only on this encounter, but on how far he was willing to tread into the unknown. The room's tension hung like a thread, taut and fragile, as Jake's heart hammered in time with the shifting dynamics before him. The four men, their earlier vigor now tempered by confusion, shared glances as their aggression flickered. Uncertainty began to creep in. Jake felt the stakes rising, not just for the patrons whose safety had come under threat, but for himself as well. "Listen," Jake began, steadying his voice. "Whatever's going on here, this isn't how you resolve conflict. You're making a scene over what? Something that isn't worth the anger?" He couldn't believe he was articulating these thoughts with such clarity. Each word felt like an assertion of his place in this chaotic fabric, the very fabric he had always felt separate from. Max rounded out the argument. "Look, you're not in here just to challenge someone. You're part of a community. Use that strength. There's no point losing control over something trivial." Their words landed, echoing in the charged silence, and for a fleeting moment, Jake saw fissures forming in the men's resolve. Slowly, some of the fury ebbed from their expressions. It seemed they were hesitant to fight back against those who were willing to intervene, willing to stand shoulder to shoulder for something greater. Jake's pulse quickened. Could they bring this back from the brink? This is your chance to step back, not only for yourselves, but for everyone around you. You want respect? You need to give it first, he implored, projecting authority he had not known he possessed. The men exchanged glances, a silent communication unfolding between them. There, amid the anxiety that had shadowed Jake, he realized they were all searching for something, understanding perhaps, or the acknowledgement of being valued and heard.
This understanding resonated within Jake as he stood there, transformed. He wasn't simply an observer anymore. He was becoming an active participant in reshaping this moment. As unexpected as it was, he felt a wave of calmness wash over him. In facing this chaos, he discovered that courage wasn't just about the absence of fear. It was about engaging with it. Standing beside Max, they formed an unspoken alliance, bolstering each other's resolve. The prospect of walking away didn't stand a chance. Together, they possessed the fortitude to navigate this storm. To Jake's astonishment, the lead man's shoulders drooped, the defiance within him faltering. "Fine," he muttered, clearly struggling with the echoes of their confrontation. "We didn't mean to cause this mess." Jake felt the ground shift as he sensed an opening, a chance to not just diffuse anger, but transform it into something constructive. "If you want to talk it out, we're here," Jake responded, his voice firm yet amicable. "This is where you can build, not destroy." Gradually, the other men lowered their voices, increasingly willing to engage.
And as they began discussing their discontent, the atmosphere lightened. It was a tentative negotiation, fraught with residual tension, but dialogue surged forth from the embers of chaos. Jake stood. He felt the energy resonate within the diner. Patrons resumed their meals, some watching with cautious interest, while others appeared reassured. The sense of community began to weave back together, through respect and a shared quest for understanding. In that decisive moment, Jake's transformation crystallized. He had learned that true leadership didn't arise from shying away or seeking praise, but from confronting conflict with integrity and presence. He proved to himself he could stand firm and advocate for others, not just in small battles, but in full-blown confrontations. And in that recognition, he felt a profound clarity replace the anxiety that had tugged at him only moments prior. "Thank you," the lead man said, his voice softer now. "You're right. We need to find better ways to deal with issues." This exchange marked a tangible shift, not just for those involved, but for Jake too. The way he held his head high, the confidence radiating from him, it was no longer just bravado. It was a reflection of his values solidifying into an identity he could embrace and be proud of. As the discussions wrapped up, Jake turned to Max, who shared a mutual look of relief and surprise. Jake recognized this as a milestone, an authentic acknowledgement of their own growth. No longer bound by the shadows of self-doubt, he liberated himself from the belief that he was merely a footnote in someone else's story. In that vibrant moment, amid a diner transformed back into a sanctuary, Jake embraced something powerful. He had stood at the edge, faced uncertainty, and emerged as the leader he had always aspired to be.
With newfound confidence, he understood this confrontation had not just been about righting wrongs, but about planting seeds for future dialogues. Each courageous choice had fortified his growth, deepening his commitment to inclusion and empathy. Leaving the diner, his heart soared. He had done more than navigate chaos. He had redefined himself and claimed his place in a narrative that was uniquely his own. In doing so, Jake realized he was ready for whatever came next, empowered by the knowledge that he could influence not just levels of conflict, but life itself. The echoes of turning points resounded through him as he stepped outside, ready to take on the world, one conversation at a time. Now this is your moment. Don't wait even one more second to subscribe to the channel to catch the next emotional journey and transformative stories. You need to support us by leaving a like right now. Let's fuel the algorithm together. We want to hear your reactions and theories, so drop a comment below and share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to be inspired. Your support means everything to us.